Welcome once more to Flashpoints. I'm Bob Orr. Joining me, Juan Zarate. He's our national security analyst. Juan, good to see you again.
Bob, great seeing you.
So, Gaza. Israel now has started the ground incursion, which Prime Minister Netanyahu says it's targeted, it's limited, but nevertheless, it's Israeli troops on the ground in Gaza.
Yeah, you see now a repeat of prior instances where the Israelis determined they couldn't do enough just from the air, that they had to go in on the ground to go after Hamas installations, weapons stashes, and these missile batteries. The real question for the Israelis is, how do you contain this? How do you get out of this offensive? And to the extent that it's limited, it's going after particular sites in northern Gaza or along the coast. Maybe you can do that, but the real problem for Israel is, does this become a quagmire, and does this escalate tensions rather than alleviate the problem?
Netanyahu said, among other things, he wants to close these tunnels that the militants have used to get into Israel, and he wants to really kind of secure the border there, close all the holes.
Yeah.
Can you do that in such a surgical way, or do you run the risk here of this getting broader?
Well, it gets broader. And the problem of tunnels, by the way, has been a problem for the Israelis for years, right? So at the border, and also for the Egyptians on the southern border of Gaza. That the tunnels are a major way that the Palestinians have used to move material, money, even commercial goods. And so getting rid of the tunnels is a major problem and is a constant issue. The problem is, of course, these are hidden. Sometimes they're tied and very sort of closely intertwined with civilian populations and homes. And how you contain the collateral damage of hurting civilian sites is really a problem. And this grows problematic for the Israelis longer term, because the longer they're on the ground, the longer there is collateral damage, young people killed, babies killed inadvertently. That becomes a moral problem for the Israelis, and there's more outrage and more questions as to what the Israelis are trying to achieve.
Who do you sense is winning kind of the public opinion war here? Israel had a terrible situation the other day where the young boys were killed on the beach in Gaza, innocents that were taken out by a missile strike. Who's winning the narrative?
Well, I think Hamas has done itself damage in two ways. One, they didn't agree to the ceasefire when the Egyptians offered it. The Israelis accepted it, the Hamas did not. And so that, in some ways, revealed Hamas's intentions, which was to continue the fight and to try to attack Israel. Two, the continuous use of the rockets to attack Israeli cities. And the images of air raid sirens going off in Israeli cities, to include Tel Aviv, I think have reached the front pages of the newspaper and have been spread throughout the internet. And so the Israelis have been able to make the case that this is an issue of self-defense for them. They're fighting a force that wants to kill their civilians indiscriminately, and that wants the destruction of their country. And so the Israelis, I think at the current moment, have made a good sort of moral argument as to why they're doing what they are. The longer this goes, though, the more this looks more like the Israelis using brute force against civilian populations. That then starts to turn the moral tables and the narrative.
Do you see any scenario at this point that would get us back on a diplomatic track? I mean, is there any way to kind of wind this down, take a pause, and try to make this happen talking?
Yeah, I think what the Israelis are counting on is their ability to inflict enough damage on Hamas and its infrastructure that Hamas is going to calculate that this isn't worth it, that they're not inflicting damage. The Iron Dome is defending Israeli citizens
for the most part.
For the most part, and they're taking and incurring a lot of damage, both in terms of their image and their infrastructure. And that then potentially leads to a ceasefire and to talks, either brokered by the Egyptians again or by a country like Qatar or Turkey that sees itself as playing a mediating role. But we're not there yet, and I think the Israelis are going to continue to take the advantage to the extent they can.
So for now, there's really no scenario that gets us quickly back to a peace negotiation.
I don't think it's quickly unless Hamas decides to submit and puts the white flag up and says we're willing to have a truce. I think the Israelis would go for that if it means the end of the missiles being lobbed into Israel.
All right, Juan, thanks as always.
Thank you, Bob.
And thanks to you for watching Flashpoints. I'm Bob Orr. We will see you next time.